Luke, and John, there were many ways that Jesus healed people. He healed from a distance, like how he healed the 10 lepers outside the walls of Jerusalem. He also healed through pure words and in an instantaneous way without words, like the hemorrhaging woman who touched his cloak without his knowledge. And also the Syro-Phoenician woman's daughter who was demon-possessed, he healed without actually seeing her. Jesus often spoke words of healing and command, and people were healed and cleansed instantly. But today's healing story of the restoration of the man's sight was a gradual healing. It went through stages. As the gospel tells us, his disciples brought and the people brought a blind man to Jesus because perhaps the disciples were not able to heal him by themselves. So Jesus took him aside. Jesus spit saliva in his hands and touched the blind man's eyes with it. And he asked him, "Do you see anything?" The man said, "I see people, but they are shadowy. They are blurry, and they look like trees walking." Then Jesus put his hands again on the blind man's eyes, and his eyes was restored. And he was able to see clearly and saw everything around him distinctly. Trees are trees, dogs are dogs, flowers are flowers, and each thing around him is distinct as they are. He can now see mountains from afar and the ground he was standing on, and most importantly, he can now see people as people and can look at them in their eyes. He now has a 20/20 vision, like being given a new pair of eyeglasses. These eyeglasses I'm wearing right now is my fifth eyeglasses since I started wearing in 2008. I started wearing glasses in my third year in the seminary, maybe because of the tons of readings and also looking at the screen most of the time. I became nearsighted. I became myopic. What I always put in mind when I go to an optometrist every 3 to 5 years is to always tell honestly to the optometrist if the lens that she tries to put on is the exact and the best fit. And you know, optometrist gives you like 2 to 3 lenses to try on and decide for both eyes. Most of the time, each eye has a different measurement from each other. At one time, I was a little confused and undecided which lens was most fit. The optometrist said, "Sir, you must be very sure which lens is the most fit, because once it is assembled, you will need to pay again if you need to change to another lens." After that, I really must make sure I got the right lenses by telling honestly to the optometrist. You know, it is a given fact that our eyes are the windows to our soul. You cannot deny what you feel because your eyes will show it. Whether you are angry, you are in love, you are afraid, you are anxious, it will show in your eyes. There is even a new technology right now where major diseases can be known by just examining the iris of our eyes. Going back to the gospel story, the blind man was honest when Jesus asked him the first time, "Do you see anything?" He can see, but not very distinctly. And because of his honesty, Jesus helped him the second time to have a clearer view. What happened that day could be a teaching moment to the disciples, who I am very sure were also watching the same healing event. This gradual restoration of the sight of this blind man speaks of the disciples' gradual enlightening about the person of Jesus Christ and his identity as the Messiah. We remember that while the disciples were with Jesus every day, their progress of knowing who really Jesus was or is quite slow. That Jesus asked them at one time, "Who do people say that I am?" And when they answer what they have heard from people, Jesus asked them the question, "What about you? Each one of you, who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter made a confession, "Lord, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Throughout their journey with Jesus, the disciples' perceptions of ministry has gradually changed. Their concept of power and what it means to be a servant also changed. Their belief about God and God's love became expansive and inclusive. And that following Jesus would mean rejection, persecution, and even death. My dear friends, perhaps like the disciples, we are in the same situation. We are all in the process of knowing who really Jesus is to our lives and the kind of ministry which we have been called to participate as future and leaders of the church. Because we know that ministry can bring both heart-rending and heart-warming experiences. We have been called to undergo the formal theological training through the divinity school so that we will be able to see distinctly ourselves, see distinctly the people, see distinctly the world God made where we are called to serve and help create God's kingdom here on earth. I remember when I was in the seminary, and every after our class, my classmates and I share what we have learned, especially those learnings that are controversial, and sometimes they call it sacrilegious or blasphemous because they don't agree with what the professors are teaching us. You know, we grapple with the ideas that our professors presented to us, like the historicity of the Bible, the scandalous substitutionary atonement, the new interpretation of the parousia, and many, many others. We wrestle with ideas as classical as Trinity and as contemporary as abortion and ordination of LGBTQIA folks in our churches. In the midst of this, one of my classmates, a Korean, said, "You know, I come to the seminary because I just want to earn a degree, just the degree." He added, "I have already made up my mind before I came here. I will not change my beliefs. Of course, I learn about these new stuffs that the professors are teaching us, but I'm not going to use them in the church because if I do, no church will ever hire me. They will kick me out because I am too liberal." Another classmate of mine was so focused on the advocacy which made him come to the seminary, and he wants to defend that advocacy above anything else. I, on the other hand, when asked what made me come to seminary, I said, "You know, I come from a family of religious people. 3 of my father's siblings are pastors. My grandmother was organist of the church. I play piano and grew up in the church and so active. And that's all. Maybe perhaps I have the potential to be a pastor after all. Although I wasn't sure at the time, but my curiosity, I told myself that I am a blank slate. I am ready to be filled in." Whatever is your intention in coming to the divinity school, one thing is for sure. We will be asked the same question Jesus asked the blind man. Do you see anything? Do you see me? Do you see yourself? Do you see others? Do you see the world around you? John Calvin, the reformer, said, and I paraphrased, the more that we see who God is, the more we understand ourselves as people who are in need of grace and mercy. True wisdom, my dear friends, is in knowing both our good side and our imperfections. We might be like the Apostle Paul, who experienced scales, like the scales falling off his eyes when he became an apostle. Can you see yourself as a church leader? Can you see beyond your imperfections to discover your innate potentials? Can you see yourself in the person you admire the most? Can you also admit that deep inside you is the person you hate the most? Honesty and humility are needed for us to admit that we don't understand everything, yet we are here together as a community to see ourselves distinctly and the world around us. We are in the divinity school to see things distinctly that we might be able to speak openly and honestly about it. That we can see what is right and what is wrong and speak for the truth. In this age of historical revisionism, fake news, misinformation, and manipulative contents in TikToks and social media, we can be agents to speak the truth and show to the people what needs to be seen. And if it is still shadowy and blurry, we try our best to speak honestly and get the help of Jesus for us to see things distinctly. We are here to listen to each other's faith story, no matter how ugly or boring or common or controversial or dramatic they sound to our classmates. We are here to see our faith development. In the divinity school, questions are valued more than easy, clear-cut answers because we affirm that God is beyond our comprehension. Therefore, we leave space and room for God's mystery in us. A quote from Alexandra 10:4 about teaching says, "The best teachers are those who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see. It is for you to see and say honestly what you have seen. Be what you see, receive who you are," as St. Augustine says. To borrow the slogan of the United Church of Christ, God is still speaking. Do not put a period where God has placed a comma. Me, as one of the faculty here at the Divinity School, I'm always delighted when students ask questions in class. Asking questions are the best way for us to check our limited perceptions and increase our viewpoints. The more that we help each other see differently with the kind of questions we ask, the more we can see what we want to see 360 degrees. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to tell your story honestly. And perhaps we should be like that blind man who was willing to be healed and he spoke honestly to Jesus. Also, perhaps we should be like the disciples who admitted they need Jesus to heal the blind man, for they were unable and unsuccessful in their attempt. So they brought the blind man to him to be healed. And perhaps we are the presence of Jesus to each other, who constantly ask this pertinent question: do you see anything? For every day, we need to remember to hear Jesus' words to the blind man and to each one of us here today. Do you see anything new? Do you see anything helpful? Do you see anything controversial? Do you see anything right? Do you see anything? Amen.